welcome back to Odd Socks. It's quite a breezy, overcast day today, but I've got some jobs to do, and to be honest, it's better than all the hot weather that we've had of recent days. I don't do very well in the heat, so coming down in the cooler weather is much better for me personally. But as you can see, some of the fantastic fragrant sweet peas that I've grown this year have done very, very well. Now, excuse my voice, I've had a bit of a cold over the last few days and I'm only just really recovering after losing my voice pretty much. But this particular variety of sweet peas, which is I think Royal Family off the top of my head, has really given me some fantastic fragrant smelling blooms this year. Now I've got them all down here, and I've also got them in other areas, and I've got another variety that is actually growing up my archway where I'm actually going to be training some of my squashes this year. Now these are starting to seed. I haven't been picking them nearly enough. I think the few days that I had where I didn't actually come down much has really spurred on the actual seed pods somewhat. But I am going to let some of these go to seed because I actually want to reuse the seed for next year, because I'd be very, very happy to actually grow this again. The amount of variety of colours in this one is really, really stunning. Now I keep cutting blooms, but with the strong scent of these blooms and having quite a bit of a cold at the moment, it actually has made me feel a bit sick, so I've actually stopped picking them. But I must get on and pick some more just so I can get another couple of flushes of these sweet peas. One of the other bonuses is I am getting an incredible amount of raspberries this year. Now, majority of these raspberries aren't massive, but oh wow, unbelievably sweet. Now, I have picked, I think, coming on to maybe 8-9 kilos of raspberries off this bush this year so far. Now, obviously, I've got a lot more to pick, but most of them will be picked and eaten as me and my husband walk past, because there is nothing quite like a really fresh raspberry picked fresh off the bush and eaten there and then. As you can see though, it's getting a little bit wild back here. It's not too bad. I can still access everything, but at the end of the year I think I'm going to give all this a really, really good tidy up. And hopefully next year I'll be able to produce even more raspberries. Now this year we have focused quite a lot on our fruit bearing plants. Well, either focusing on it for this year or actually planning it for next year's growth. I want to move a little bit more into the fruit section because of the positives, because of how expensive it is to buy fresh fruit here in the UK, in the supermarkets or markets or wherever it is that you get your fruit from. So I want to make sure that I have as much of a supply as what I can possibly use, just because it's June and fast approaching July. There is still loads of sowings to do. Now I have run out completely of compost. I've got a little bit of a handful left in the bag, and I just have not had the time or the energy to go and buy any more compost. Now I use compost because I start most of my seedlings in modules, and I still want to carry on sowing. There is still an awful lot of things you can still sow at this time of year, and I've certainly got the space this year because we're not growing potatoes, we are not growing leeks or onions or garlic really this year because of past issues with allium leaf miner and white onion rot as well. Our potatoes, in my eyes, take up far too much room, and even though potatoes are really tasty when you grow your own, I can do it as a cheaper option by buying in good quality potatoes locally. I don't want to give up a massive area of potatoes that will pretty much only give us enough potatoes through probably half of the year. So again, this year, that's not something we've done. Now, we have planted a handful of potatoes in one of the beds that we had an empty space in, and they will be harvested much later in the year, so long as we don't get any frosts. which for our weather, you never quite know whether we are going to get late frost or early frost, or in general, whatever the weather will be here in the UK. But I have been direct sowing over the last few days. So some of the things I've been direct sowing this week is some of the spinach called Matador. It is supposed to be slow to bolt, but I did find after me harvesting just one lot of spinach leaves earlier on in the year, they actually did bolt quite quickly. Also direct sowed some coriander, a load of basil, a load of fennel. I'm going to be direct sowing some beetroots as well, and pretty much anything else that I can mix up in our beds. We have a lot of gaps. As summer goes on and these plants get much bigger, those gaps will get much smaller anyway. But in the meantime, there's a few things I want to be able to get into the ground. Now, unfortunately, all my coriander that I'd planted this year, if it hadn't been eaten by the slugs or the snails or the mice when I first planted, it's actually bolted within about 4 weeks of actually growing them and putting them into the ground. I've never had coriander quite bolt that easily before. So that is definitely something I am going to be direct sowing into the ground. Now I have got an area I've prepared, and that has been raked to a fine tilth without disturbing too much of the soil, and those seeds will just go into the ground. They'll be well watered, and we shall see if anything at all germinates. Now, I'm all for direct sowing. It just hasn't worked very well for us over the years. We get a lot more pest damage, we have a lot less control. I would rather be able to direct sow into modules, get them to a certain size, and then know what I've got to deal with. But this year, even our module plants have been decimated by the slugs and snails. Now, it's been dry for at least a week, so I'm hoping the slug population has been knocked back a little bit at least, but we shall see. Obviously, I've lost a lot of carrots and I've lost a lot of other bits and pieces, but I have resown those as well. So this week it has been mainly about tidying up, trying to find what I've got to sow, and trying to get as much of those little jobs done as possible. But if you are in a predicament where you have lost a lot of your fruits, your plants, your vegetables, whatever it is that you may have lost at the moment this time this year, then don't be afraid to resow an awful lot of the produce. There's only a handful of things that really are not worth resowing at this time of year. Now, even though we've had our issues this year, we have had some really good success stories too. One of them being our brassica cage. Now, I'm not going to open it all up because I'm just going to be inviting all those butterflies to come in. And when I say all those butterflies, I haven't actually seen one cabbage white butterfly at all this year so far, which for us, it is quite unusual. In this brassica cage, you saw me planting some, earliest of all, some greyhound cabbages and some spring greens. We've also got some red cabbages added in there from any gaps that we had where we lost cabbages right at the beginning. We've also got a row of sprouts, and we've got a row of purple sprouting broccoli as well. Now, in general, our cabbages are looking quite good. There's one or two with a few holes here and there, but considering how bad it's been with the slugs and snails this year, our lettuces, apart from losing a few, which really it does happen quite easily, they're looking really, really healthy. Now, there's a few cabbages in here that are looking a little bit more holed over the last day or two, and that damage really has just been over the last couple of days. So I think I will pick those before the others, just so we don't actually lose them anymore. But I'm actually really looking forward to having our cabbages throughout the next month or two. But I will be sowing more cabbages to go in to replace the ones that we're actually taking out, because this bed should be filled all the way through winter as well. Now, in my archway, I have planted, direct sowed, a load of basil seeds as well, so I can get the basil seeds to grow up here. This lettuce is They look pretty and they've been very abundant with their leaves, but I actually don't like the taste of them, so I won't be growing these ones again. I think at the end of the year I am actually going to put maybe 1 or 2 rhubarbs on the inside of this frame, because that row that I've got down there does need to be split up. That was kind of my nursery bed for them, and now I can see which ones are the healthiest ones, because they really have perked up quite a lot compared to the beginning of the year. And I'm going to place a couple under here. I've also got some lavender cuttings, and I think I'm going to put some lavender cuttings around here somewhere and actually make them and trim them into a nice flowering bush. Hopefully this will help with the pollinators at certain times of the years, obviously in the future. But the sage is doing okay. It's starting to fall back a little bit, but there is plenty of fresh growth. And this is the highly scented sweet peas, and these smell absolutely beautiful. Now, these are not as tall as the ones on the other side of the allotment. In fact, there's probably about 2 foot or more difference, but I'm really happy with it so far. Now, one of the great things that we built this great big arch for was for our squashes, and they have finally taken off, and that urticary is starting to climb the actual trellis. Now, you do have to guide it, you do have to put it up in a way so it kind of trails and starts climbing up, and hopefully in the end it will make its own decision and start rambling up the sides. But it will be something that we do on a daily basis, because squash plants, once they start growing, they grow very, very fast. Now, obviously with some of these bare beds that I've got, I will be direct sowing like I've already done, like I've already showed you. We'll wait and see how much of this direct sowing actually survives. But as you can see, the rhubarb really has picked up. Now, it's still not as big as some of the rhubarb I've had in the past, but it will get there. Now, I did grow this from seed, and there is 1 or 2 plants that is definitely struggling. But I've got plenty of different areas that I can pop some of these rhubarbs in at the end of the year. There'll be 1 or 2 that stay there. There'll be 1 or 2 underneath the archway. And there'll be different ones in different parts of the allotment, just to spread them out a little bit. And because they are quite hardy and they can be planted individually on their own through the wood chip somewhere, I don't necessarily have to have a big old bed just for rhubarb. So it's a bit unusual for us to have so many empty beds or so many gaps in our planting. Normally our beds are reasonably full at this time of year, and if they are empty, it's because we've harvested whatever crop that we have grown there already. This year, most of the gaps or the empty beds is because we've not either lost all our plants or our crops to slugs or snails, or we actually haven't got much to put in there. We try to be as, well, let's say self-sufficient as we possibly can, but it's not always the case where we can do it for the whole of the year. But there is definitely certain crops and things that we can be self-sufficient on, mainly our tomatoes, our chilies, and normally our herbs and things like that. This year it might be a little bit different. But because we're not doing our onions this year, because we're not doing the leeks, the garlics and the potatoes, these crops take up so much room normally. We normally have 4 to 8 beds of these crops. And because we're not growing those crops, we have an awful lot of space. Now, I have struggled this year to find something to fill those spaces in with something that we're going to use and something that can be stored or prepared for long-term eating. Lettuces are great. You get a lot of seeds in your lettuce packets and they taste great, and it's great for that bit of freshness, but it's not something that we can store over a length of time, not really. They are handy to have because you can just pick the leaves and they can last you several months if you treat them right and it's not too hot that causes them to bolt. But they have been a great ground filler in places where we've wanted not to weed so much, and this really has cut down some of our weeding jobs. But we need some ideas of different things for us to grow. I don't want anything that's too complicated, that needs too much work. I would love it if it was perennial. I don't want anything that will need a lot of heat, so it would need to be sown in a greenhouse or grown on in a greenhouse or a polytunnel. I have full polytunnels and full greenhouses that I really don't want to add anything else to at the moment. I want something to be able to grow in these beds. Now, obviously, I'm not going to grow anything else in this bed this year. The squashes in here, the Pacific Giant at the end, and the 2 buttercups I've got here are doing fine enough on their own. In fact, that bit of black plastic over the top to help us with weeding has really, really benefited these squash plants. But I will have gaps soon enough as I take up some of these lettuces that obviously have bolted or gone through bits and pieces. When the beetroot starts harvesting, I'll need something to go into there. When my parsley plant that is over there, that is full of flowers that I've allowed to go to flower, which was from last year, that will be all dug up and removed soon, and that's quite a large area for us to plant in. So I'm actually after some ideas, guys. I want something to plant and grow. Perennials would be a really good thing, but something that can be preserved well and is actually half decent on the taste. We will grow more garlic in the future, more onions and things like that, but for the next year or two we probably won't be. But I need some ideas. I don't want fruiting ideas. I have got plenty of fruit. The only ones that I want to add is my loganberries, because loganberries are a childhood memory. I really, really enjoyed them. We used to grow them quite a lot in our back garden when we were kids, and I really do enjoy the taste, especially a loganberry preserve. We've already got our blueberries, which I'll be adding to. We have got our lemonade berries, which is like a pink blueberry, really. I have bought cranberries. I have got red currants. I have definitely got plenty of black currants. In fact, I have picked kilos of black currants already so far, which I've used in some jams and some preserves so far. I've probably got another 10-20 kilos of black currants to actually harvest. Obviously, I've got my raspberries, I've got my strawberries, and I am going to add 1 or 2 other things to that list. But I want something savoury. I want to be able to growing some vegetables that will store a little bit better. So obviously lettuces are great and they're fantastic through the summer months, and certain lettuce leaves through the winter months, which we can just pick the leaves and add to our food. They're great ground cover too, so if you've got an area that you really do need to cover to help cut down any weeds, salads are a great one to do that for, because the salad seed for the lettuces is really quite cheap and you get an awful lot of seeds in a packet. So if you've got any idea, guys, of what I could be thinking about in the near future, nothing that needs to go into the greenhouses or the polytunnels, because we've already got future plans, and obviously we've already got our chilies and our tomatoes and other bits and pieces that we've got going on in our greenhouses. But I want some ideas to fill these beds. We've never had so many empty gaps in June before. Like I said before, I have been direct sowing and I will be getting some other little bits and pieces, but I really need some ideas, guys. So please, in the comments below, if you can leave me some of your thoughts of what to grow. The more unusual, the better, but it's only suitable if it's half decent eating. As you can see, my beans have actually started to pick up quite a lot. There's an awful lot of growth on these. Not much leaves past a certain point, but there is a lot of growth over the last few days, and hopefully this will start kicking in and we'll get a half decent crop out of these. Now, I have lost 1 or 2 of the plants, but in general they're doing okay. So guys, that is it for today. I am going to go around, do all my bits of weeding that I've started doing. It's crazy how quickly these weeds actually come up, and just by walking past and pulling them up or digging them up, whatever you're doing, it makes a massive difference on the overall patch. But I'm finding it a really weird year this year, and I think after having a busy, well, almost a busy year with builds and designs and ideas and things like that, now that's all stopped, I'm kind of just pottering about. And when I've got failures of plants that are failing to thrive for one reason or another, I'm kind of twiddling my thumbs. So maybe I need to think of a new project.